I sat beside David's hospital bed, my fingers gently wrapped around his. The machines beeped softly, reminding me with every sound that I was losing him. His skin looked pale and thin, his breathing shallow. I had spent the last 3 nights here, barely sleeping, hoping for one more moment when he'd open his eyes and smile at me like he used to. The doctors had said it could be any day now. I was preparing myself to say goodbye to the man I thought I would grow old with. When his eyelids fluttered, I leaned closer and whispered, "It's okay, baby. You can rest now. I'll always love you." My voice trembled as tears rolled down my face. For a second, I thought I saw him try to smile, but it faded quickly. I sat there for a while longer, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart monitor, trying to memorize every detail, his hands, his wedding band, the faint smell of his cologne still lingering on his blanket. Eventually, I needed air. My chest felt heavy, my throat tight. I walked out into the hallway, still wiping my tears. The hospital was quiet, just the hum of fluorescent lights and distant chatter from the nurse's station. I leaned against the wall near the vending machine, trying to catch my breath. That's when I heard it, 2 nurses talking just around the corner. At first, I didn't pay attention. I was too lost in my own thoughts. But then one of them said David's name. I froze. "Did you see his visitor earlier today?" One of them said softly. "That young woman. She looked so sad." The other nurse replied, "Yeah, I did. Poor thing. He told her not to come today because his wife would be here." My stomach dropped. My heart started pounding so hard it almost drowned out their voices. I pressed myself closer to the wall, afraid to make a sound. "He looked so guilty," the first nurse added. "I can't imagine keeping something like that secret while you're dying." They kept talking, their voices fading as they walked away, but I couldn't hear anything else after that. My mind was spinning. Another visitor? A woman? Someone he didn't want me to see? I stood there in that hallway, unable to move. Everything I thought I knew about my husband, about our marriage, started to crack apart in my head. I felt sick. My hands were shaking, and I had to grab the edge of the vending machine to steady myself. All this time, I thought I was losing my soulmate. Now I didn't even know who I was saying goodbye to. I wanted to run back into that room and demand answers, but I couldn't even think straight. The man I loved was dying, and suddenly, I wasn't sure if the life we built together had been real at all. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I didn't move at first, afraid the nurses would see me standing there, eavesdropping. I took a few careful steps closer and slipped behind the thin curtain that divided the hallway. My hands were cold and shaking. I told myself I was just imagining things, that maybe they were talking about someone else with the same name. But deep down, I already knew. The nurses' voices were calm, casual, like they were discussing any other patient. "Chloe's been coming here every week," one of them said. "She stays for hours when the wife isn't around." My stomach twisted. Chloe. The name echoed in my head. I didn't know anyone by that name. Who was she? Why had David never mentioned her? The other nurse sighed. "He told her not to come today because his wife would be here. Poor guy probably didn't want any drama." I covered my mouth to keep from gasping. My knees felt weak. I leaned against the wall, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. They were talking about my husband, the man lying in that room, dying, and some other woman who had been visiting him behind my back. I wanted to stop listening, but I couldn't. Every word felt like another knife to the chest. "I heard she brings him food from that little cafe across the street," the first nurse said. They seemed close. "It's just sad, you know? Secrets like that come out eventually." Close. That word made my head spin. I felt dizzy, like the air had been sucked out of the hallway. My fingers gripped the curtain, my nails digging into the fabric. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. They eventually walked away, their voices fading down the corridor. I stayed there, hidden, staring at nothing. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Did he love her? Was that why he'd become distant before he got sick? Every late night, every missed call, every excuse, suddenly none of it made sense anymore. The weight of it all pressed down on me until I could barely stand. My husband, the man I had trusted more than anyone in this world, had been lying to me while pretending to fight for his life. The tears that came now weren't from grief, they were from anger. Hot, sharp, and bitter. I wiped my face and forced myself to breathe. I couldn't confront him yet. I needed to know the truth, all of it. I needed proof, not whispers. If I walked in there right now, he'd deny it, or worse, he'd die with his lies still between us. So I decided to stay quiet, to watch, to listen. The love I had carried into that hospital had turned into something else, something cold and burning. I wasn't just a grieving wife anymore. I was a woman who needed answers. When I walked back into David's hospital room, the lights were dim and the steady sound of the monitor filled the silence. He was sleeping, his chest rising and falling slowly, the same calm look on his face that used to make me feel safe. But now all I could feel was doubt. I couldn't stop thinking about what the nurses had said, about the woman named Chloe. I sat down beside him and stared at his hand resting on the blanket. My eyes drifted lower, and that's when I saw it, his phone, half tucked under the sheet near his side. He never went anywhere without it. Even during his treatments, he'd ask the nurses to keep it close. I had always respected his privacy, but now I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my gut. I hesitated for a long time. My heart told me it was wrong, but my mind whispered that I needed to know the truth. My hands trembled as I reached for the phone. I looked at David one last time. He was still asleep, his breathing steady. Slowly, I picked it up and unlocked it using the same passcode he'd had for years, our wedding anniversary. The screen lit up, and within seconds, my heart began to break all over again. The first thing I saw was a message notification. It wasn't from work or a friend. It was from someone saved as Chloe Redheart. My stomach turned. I opened their chat, and the flood of messages nearly made me drop the phone. There were hundreds of texts, months of conversations. I scrolled through slowly, my hands shaking. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. She called him baby. She sent him pictures from vacations, coffee shops, and hotel rooms. He replied with hearts, promises, and words he used to say to me. In one message, he told her how much he missed her scent. In another, she wrote that she couldn't wait for their weekend getaway. There were dates and locations, places he told me he was traveling for work conferences. My chest hurt with every scroll. I felt sick realizing how easily he had lied to me while pretending to be faithful. And then I found the message that shattered everything. It was from Chloe, sent just a few days ago. It read, "If you really loved me, you'd tell her the truth before you go." I just stared at the screen. My hands went numb, and I felt my throat close up. The truth was there in front of me. My dying husband had been cheating on me for months, maybe longer. Even as his life was slipping away, he hadn't stopped lying. I sat in silence for a long time, the phone still in my lap, my tears falling onto the screen. I wanted to scream, to wake him up and demand answers. But instead, I just sat there frozen, realizing that the man I thought I was losing was already gone long before his heart started to fail. I sat there in the quiet hospital room, the glow from the monitor reflecting off the phone still in my hands. My mind drifted back to the life we had built, or at least the one I thought we had. I used to believe David and I had the kind of marriage people dreamed about. We'd met in college, fallen in love quickly, and promised to always be each other's home. I thought we were unbreakable. We had our little house in a quiet Ohio suburb, with white shutters and a big oak tree in the front yard. I used to love waking up early to make breakfast while he read the newspaper at the table. On weekends, we'd go for drives just to talk. We'd sit by the lake and dream about the future, the trips we'd take, the kids we might have one day, the kind of old couple we'd become. He always made me feel like I was enough. But somewhere along the way, things started to change. I remember when he began saying he had to work late. It didn't happen all at once, just small things at first, a missed dinner, a late-night text from the office, weekends spent catching up on paperwork. I used to tease him about being a workaholic, and he'd laugh and kiss me on the forehead, saying, "You know I'm doing this for us." Back then, I believed him. I told myself that every marriage had its rough patches. He was under pressure, that's all. When he came home exhausted, I didn't complain. I made him dinner, rubbed his shoulders, told him I was proud of him. I wanted to be the supportive wife, the one who never doubted him. Now, sitting here, I could see all the signs I had ignored. The sudden trips that didn't make sense, the times he'd shower right after coming home, the phone calls he'd take outside. I remembered the way he started locking his phone, something he'd never done before. I told myself it was for work security. I was so naive. When he got sick, I thought it was our second chance. We talked more, held hands more, spent long nights remembering the good old days. He told me he was grateful for me, that I was his everything. And I believed every word because I wanted to. I thought his illness had made him realize what really mattered. But now, all those loving looks and soft words felt like lies he told to ease his guilt. Every "I love you" replayed in my head, sounding emptier each time. The man I thought I knew so well had been living another life right in front of me. I looked at him lying there, weak and pale, and for the first time, I didn't feel love. I felt hollow. I had been holding on to a version of David that never really existed. The truth was, I had been married to a stranger, one who wore love like a mask. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital earlier than usual. The halls were quiet, the air heavy with that familiar sterile smell. I walked slowly toward David's room, still unsure of what I was going to do or say. I hadn't slept much. The messages, the lies, they replayed in my head all night. I needed answers, but I wasn't ready to face him yet. As I got closer to his room, I noticed the door was slightly open. I heard soft talking from inside. At first, I thought it might be a nurse checking on him, but then I heard a woman's voice, gentle, shaky, filled with emotion. My heart started to race. I peeked through the small gap, and there she was. A young woman sat by David's bed, holding his hand. She was probably in her late 20s, with long brown hair and soft features. She looked nervous, her eyes red from crying. I didn't need anyone to tell me who she was. I just knew this was Chloe, the woman from the messages, the one who had been visiting him in secret. I froze in the hallway, my breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I just stood there watching as she leaned closer, brushing her hand gently over his arm. "I'll never forget you," she whispered. Then she bent down and kissed his forehead tenderly. Something inside me twisted. My chest ached so badly I had to hold the wall to steady myself. I wanted to burst in there, scream, demand to know how she dared to be there. But I stayed silent, watching through the small opening. I needed to see everything, to understand just how deep this betrayal went. David didn't say anything. His eyes were half open, his breathing shallow. He looked too weak to respond, but there was no confusion on his face. He knew exactly who she was. That realization hit harder than anything else. He had allowed this. Even on what might be his last days, he had chosen to share them with her too. After a few minutes, Chloe stood up, wiping her tears. She took one last look at him, whispered something I couldn't hear, and slowly walked out. I quickly stepped back so she wouldn't see me. My hands were trembling. When she passed by, she didn't even glance my way. She had no idea I was there. When she disappeared down the hallway, I took a deep breath and walked into the room. David stirred a little, his eyes fluttering open for a second. "Melissa," he murmured weakly, trying to smile. I stood there, my heart pounding, forcing myself to stay calm. I wanted to ask him everything right then, who she was, how long, why. But I didn't. Not yet. I needed to hear it from him, and I needed to be ready when I did. So I sat down beside him, quietly, pretending nothing had happened. Inside, though, I was burning. That evening, the room was quiet except for the steady beeping of the monitor. The sun had gone down, and the soft light from the lamp cast long shadows across the floor. I sat beside David, watching his chest rise and fall. His breathing sounded uneven, heavier than before. I didn't say much. My mind was too full of questions I couldn't ask yet. After a while, he stirred. His eyes opened slowly, and for the first time that day, he looked straight at me. His hand moved weakly, searching for mine. I hesitated but finally reached out and held it. His skin felt cold. "Melissa," he whispered, his voice barely there. "I'm sorry for everything." The words hit me like a punch. I froze, my heart racing. My throat felt tight, but I forced myself to ask, "What do you mean?" He swallowed hard, struggling to speak. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his eyes glistening. He paused, his breathing shallow. "I didn't want you to find out this way." For a moment, I thought he was going to say it, the truth about Chloe, about everything he'd hidden. My pulse quickened as I leaned closer. "David, please," I whispered. "Tell me what you need to say." But he couldn't. His eyes fluttered shut again, and his grip on my hand loosened. He tried to speak, but only a faint sound came out, a breath that carried no words. I could see the pain on his face, the guilt, the regret, or maybe it was just the weakness of his body giving up. I wanted to shake him, to make him finish his sentence. My mind screamed for answers, but I couldn't bring myself to push him. Part of me still cared, still saw the man I had once loved. "Don't talk now," I said softly, forcing calm into my voice even though my chest burned. "Just rest, okay? You need to rest." He gave a tiny nod as if he understood, and then his eyes closed again. I sat there for hours, holding his hand, watching the rise and fall of his chest grow slower. The nurses came in a few times to check on him, but I barely noticed. My thoughts were spinning, half anger, half grief. Sometime after midnight, I realized the room had gone silent. The monitor that had filled the air with steady beeps had stopped. I looked at him, waiting for his chest to move, but it didn't. His hand lay still in mine. The tears came quietly, without control. I wasn't crying for the man who had just died. I was crying for the life I thought we had. The truth was, I didn't know who David really was anymore. I mourned the illusion, the love that had never been real. The man beside me was gone, but the betrayal he left behind still lived inside me, heavy and unspoken. A week after the funeral, the house felt unbearably quiet. Every sound echoed, the creak of the floor, the ticking clock, the distant hum of traffic outside. I had boxed up most of David's things, but his presence still lingered everywhere. I kept waiting for the grief to fade, but it didn't. Instead, it mixed with anger and confusion until I couldn't tell one feeling from another. One morning, my phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm and professional. "Mrs. Carter, this is Robert Hayes. I was your husband's attorney. He left behind a letter for you and some instructions I've been asked to deliver personally." My stomach tightened. "A letter?" I repeated, unsure if I even wanted to know what it said. "Yes," he said gently. "If you're available, I'd like to meet at my office this afternoon." A few hours later, I found myself sitting across from him in a quiet room that smelled faintly of old paper and coffee. Robert was an older man with kind eyes, but even he seemed uneasy as he placed a sealed envelope on the table. "This was written by David about 2 weeks before his passing," he said. "He wanted you to have it privately before we discussed the rest of the estate." My hands shook as I picked it up. The handwriting on the envelope was David's, neat, familiar. For a moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it. Finally, I took a deep breath and tore it open. His words began softly, almost lovingly. He thanked me for standing by him during his illness, said I had been his strength. Then halfway through, the tone changed. He wrote that he needed to confess something before leaving this world. He admitted that he had been unfaithful, that he had been seeing someone named Chloe. My chest tightened as I kept reading. He said he never stopped loving me, that he had made mistakes but didn't want me to hate him forever. He tried to justify his choices, saying he had been lonely and scared when his health began to decline. It all sounded like excuses, weak and selfish ones. Then came the part that broke me completely. He wrote that Chloe was pregnant. He said he had arranged for part of his life insurance to go to her, for the baby's future. He wanted me to understand, to forgive him, and to take care of myself. I dropped the letter onto the table, staring at it like it was something poisonous. My body went numb. I could hear Robert's voice in the background, explaining the legal parts of the will, but none of it registered. All I could think about was that while I had been nursing him, praying for him, crying for him, he had been planning a future with someone else's child. Tears blurred my vision. The betrayal burned deeper than anything death could bring. I thought I had already lost everything when David died, but in that moment, I realized I had lost him long before his heart stopped beating. For days, I could barely eat or sleep. The letter sat on the table, its pages crumpled and stained with my tears. Every time I tried to move on, the words came back to haunt me. Chloe is pregnant. The man I had loved for 12 years had not only betrayed me, but had planned to take care of his mistress and her child with the money meant for our future. My sadness slowly turned into something else, something sharp and cold. I wasn't going to let his lies live on after he was gone. A week later, I called Robert Hayes again. He sounded surprised to hear from me. "Mrs. Carter," he said gently, "how are you holding up?" "I'm not," I said plainly. "But I need to ask you something important. About the insurance policy." He hesitated. "Yes, what about it?" "I want to know if I can challenge it," I said. "If he lied in those documents about his marriage, his dependents, anything, can I fight it?" There was a long pause. Then his voice softened. "If there was misrepresentation, yes. You may have legal grounds. But are you sure you want to go through with this? It will be messy." I didn't even have to think about it. "I'm sure," I said. "He lied to me. He doesn't get to lie to the law, too." The next few days were filled with meetings, paperwork, and late-night calls. I went through David's files, his old emails, and his phone records. The more I found, the angrier I became. There were messages between him and the insurance agent, where he conveniently forgot to mention me as the sole spouse and beneficiary. He had added Chloe as a dependent, claiming she was a relative in need. It was deceit, pure and simple. When Chloe finally found out about the legal challenge, she called me. Her voice was shaking. "Melissa, please," she said. "I didn't know he was married. I swear, if I had known. I cut her off. Don't lie to me, Chloe. I've seen your messages. You called me his wife in one of them. There was silence on the line. Then she started crying. He told me you didn't love him anymore, she whispered. He said you were cold, that the marriage was already over. Her words stung, but I didn't let it show. You still chose to stay with him, I said quietly. You still visited him in secret. You knew exactly what you were doing. Then I hung up. Robert filed the case, and the process began. I wasn't doing it for revenge in the childish sense. It wasn't about getting the money back. It was about the principle, about making sure David's lies didn't win. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was standing up for myself. He had stolen my trust, my love, and my peace. But this was something he couldn't control from the grave. My pain had turned into purpose. I was finally fighting back. The day of the court hearing arrived faster than I expected. I sat quietly in the front row, my hands cold, my heart steady. Chloe was there too, dressed neatly, pretending to be calm. But I could see the fear in her eyes. The judge reviewed everything, the text messages, the insurance documents, the statements from Robert and the insurance company. It was all laid out piece by piece, showing how David had lied on official papers and how Chloe had knowingly benefited from it. When the decision finally came, the courtroom fell silent. The judge's voice was firm. Based on the evidence presented, the court finds that the policy was obtained under false representation. The secondary beneficiary's claim is void. The full insurance payout will revert to Mrs. Melissa Carter. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It was over. Chloe's face turned pale, and tears filled her eyes. She stood up suddenly, her voice breaking. This isn't fair. He loved me. He wanted me to have it. But no one responded. The judge simply nodded to the bailiff, and Chloe rushed out of the courtroom, crying and covering her face. The sound of her heels faded down the hall, leaving behind a heavy silence. Robert turned to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, he said softly. I nodded, though my chest felt tight. Right didn't always feel good. It just felt necessary. In the weeks that followed, I received the insurance payout. The money didn't bring comfort. It only reminded me of what I had lost and what had been broken beyond repair. But I wanted to turn something dark into something meaningful. After much thought, I decided to donate a portion of it to a heart charity in David's name. Heart disease had taken him, and despite everything, a small part of me still wanted to remember the man I had once loved. Not the liar, but the husband who, at least for a time, made me believe in love. I sold our house not long after. Every room carried memories I no longer wanted to keep. The laughter, the arguments, the lies hidden beneath ordinary moments. I packed only a few boxes, photos of my parents, some clothes, and the framed picture from our wedding day. I didn't hate the woman in that photo anymore. She had loved with all her heart, and that wasn't her mistake. I moved to a smaller city near the coast, somewhere quiet where no one knew my story. The air felt lighter there. I found a simple apartment, started volunteering at a local clinic, and took long walks by the water in the evenings. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Not joy, not excitement, but peace. I no longer carried the weight of pretending. The lies were gone, the secrets buried, and the past finally behind me. I wasn't just free of David. I was free of the illusion. A year passed before I gathered the courage to visit David's grave. The morning air was cool, the kind that brushed softly against the skin and made everything feel still. I carried only one thing with me, a single white rose. No bouquet, no letter, no tears this time. Just quiet acceptance. The cemetery was nearly empty. A few birds sang in the distance, their voices light against the silence. When I reached his headstone, I stood for a moment, staring at his name etched in stone. It used to make me cry seeing it, but now it didn't. It just felt final, like a chapter long overdue for closure. I knelt down and placed the rose carefully on the ground. For a few seconds, I said nothing. I just breathed and looked at the stone that marked where everything, the love, the lies, the promises, ended. Then I finally spoke, my voice steady and calm. Goodbye, David. This time I mean it. It wasn't said with hate or pain, just truth. I had already cried enough tears for him. I had screamed, grieved, fought, and survived. But standing there, I realized that forgiveness wasn't about him. It was about freeing myself from everything he left behind. The doubt, the betrayal, the heartbreak that had once swallowed my life whole. I thought about the years we spent together, how I had believed in every word, every touch, every I love you. Back then, I would have done anything for him. Now, I understood that the woman I was, the one who trusted too much and questioned too little, was gone too. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and finally unafraid to live on her own terms. I ran my fingers lightly over his name one last time, then stood up. The white rose looked simple against the dark stone, pure, peaceful, untouched by the pain that had once surrounded us. It wasn't a symbol of love anymore. It was a symbol of release. As I walked away, the weight that had lived in my chest for so long began to lift. Every step away from that grave felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been buried with him. The sky was clear, and the wind carried a faint scent of spring. I smiled, a real, quiet smile that came from somewhere deep inside. I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need answers. I didn't even need closure from him. I had already given that to myself. For the first time, I wasn't Melissa Carter, the widow of a cheating husband. I was Melissa, just Melissa, whole, alive, and free. As I reached the end of the cemetery path, I looked back one last time and whispered, "Thank you for the lesson." Then I turned toward the road ahead, the sunlight warm on my face. The man who lied to me was gone. But the woman he underestimated? She had finally found her peace.